When my husband died, I thought the hardest part would be the grief. But what came next, I never saw coming. "Don't be dramatic, pack your bags and learn to live on your own," my daughter-in-law, Tara, said to me at dinner. Her voice was cold, almost detached, like she had no idea the weight of her words. But they hit me like a ton of bricks. It felt like my entire world had just shattered into pieces, and I had no idea what was going to happen next. You would think that after 40 years of marriage, after raising a son together, I would be prepared for the worst. But nothing prepared me for this. The house that my husband and I had built from the ground up, the memories of a life we'd created, now felt like a prison. The pain of losing him was still fresh, but Tara's words added a new layer of sorrow. I had always tried to be a good mother-in-law. I had welcomed Tara into our family with open arms. But now, I saw her for what she truly was, a stranger, cold and calculating. She looked at me like I was a burden, a relic of the past, a weight she no longer wanted to carry. My son, Warren, sat there beside her, his eyes avoiding mine. I had raised him, cared for him through every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every victory. But now, as a grown man, he couldn't even meet my gaze. He nodded along with Tara, agreeing with her suggestion without a word. It wasn't just the house they wanted. They wanted me gone. And the worst part? They didn't even have the decency to pretend they cared. They were both so confident in their plan to push me out of my own life. I had always been the one to put my family first, to sacrifice for them, to make sure everyone was happy. But now, it seemed like all of that meant nothing. I had no place in their world anymore. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the loss of my husband or the realization that my own son and daughter-in-law had abandoned me. It felt like I had given everything to them, and in return, they had taken it all away. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just sat there, stunned, as Tara's words echoed in my mind. "Pack your bags." I couldn't believe it. My hands were trembling as I got up from the table. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I went upstairs to the room I had shared with Noel for all these years. The room still smelled like him, like the cologne he wore every day. His glasses were still on the nightstand, just where he left them. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind raced, but my heart felt frozen. This wasn't supposed to be my reality. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. I had spent decades building a life with Noel, raising Warren, and now I was being tossed aside like yesterday's news. I felt lost, more alone than I had ever felt before. The silence in the house was deafening. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, staring at the walls, at the life that I had built, that was now slipping through my fingers. I thought about everything I had done for my family, every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every sleepless night spent caring for them. And now, none of it mattered. Tara had made it clear. I wasn't welcome. Warren hadn't said a word, but his silence spoke volumes. As I sat in that room, I realized that the hardest part of losing Noel wasn't the grief. It was this. The cold, indifferent way my own family was treating me. I couldn't believe that the people I loved so much, the people I had sacrificed for, could turn on me so easily. But there it was. The reality of my life. I had been replaced. I had been cast aside. And I had no idea what to do next. The days following that conversation with Tara felt like a slow, suffocating descent into something I could not escape. I walked through the house that had once been filled with laughter, with Noel's deep voice echoing through the halls. Now, it felt cold, hollow, as if it was no longer my home. It had become a foreign place, one where I didn't belong. The silence was overwhelming. No more footsteps in the hallway, no more knocks on the door from Warren asking me how my day had been. It was just me, alone, surrounded by memories that now stung rather than comforted. I had never imagined that this would be my life after Noel's death. We had built this life together, brick by brick, and now it was falling apart in front of me, piece by piece. I had spent every year of my life caring for my family, making sure they were well fed, well loved, and taken care of. But now, they had all turned their backs on me. I couldn't help but wonder if I had missed something. Had I been so caught up in trying to hold everything together that I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface? Maybe this had been coming for years, and I was just too blind to notice. Warren had always been close to me, or so I thought. But now, I could feel the distance between us growing with every passing day. His silence, his avoidance, it spoke louder than any words ever could. I knew he was not the same man he had once been. Tara had changed him. She had been manipulating him, pulling him away from me, slowly but surely. I couldn't pinpoint when it had started, but it was clear now. She had succeeded. And I was left with nothing. I walked through the house, retracing the familiar path to the kitchen, where Noel and I used to sit and talk for hours. The countertops were still the same, the old coffee pot still sat in the corner where we had left it. But it all felt different now. The smell of coffee, which used to bring me comfort, now made me sick. I didn't even know why I was still here. It was as if I was stuck in this place, unable to move forward, unable to let go. Every time I tried to gather my thoughts, my mind kept returning to Tara's words. Pack your bags and learn to live on your own. How could she say that to me? How could she throw me away so easily, like I was nothing more than a nuisance? It wasn't just the house she wanted. It was me. She wanted me gone. And Warren, my own son, was too afraid to stand up to her. He had chosen her over me, over the woman who had raised him, loved him, and given him everything. I had always put my family first. I had sacrificed my dreams, my ambitions, for them. And this was the thanks I got. I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind, but they kept coming back, like waves crashing against the shore. How had things gotten so bad? I had given everything to them, and now they were taking it all away. The memories of my life with Noel, the life we had built together, felt like they were slipping through my fingers. I had nothing left. I couldn't even bring myself to leave the house. I kept telling myself that I would leave, that I would find a way to move on, but the truth was, I was terrified. I had no idea where I would go, what I would do. The world felt so foreign to me now. Everything had changed. And the worst part was, I didn't even know how to fight back. I had always been the one who kept the peace, the one who held everything together. But now, I was the one being pushed aside. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around at the familiar furniture, the pictures of our family on the walls. It all seemed so distant, so unreal. It felt like a lifetime ago that Noel and I had filled this house with love. I touched the photo of our wedding day, the day we had promised to always be there for each other. I ran my fingers over the glass, wishing I could turn back time, wishing I could go back to those days when everything was right. But I knew I couldn't. Time had passed, and things had changed. I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling Warren, asking him to come over, to talk to me, to tell me that he still cared, that I wasn't just a burden to him. But I knew it wouldn't make a difference. He had already made his choice. And it wasn't me. I sat down on the couch, my head in my hands, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and resignation. I had spent so many years trying to hold everything together, trying to keep the family intact. But now, it felt like everything was falling apart. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. My mind wandered back to the conversation with Tara, her cold words echoing in my ears. Learn to live on your own. Could I do it? Could I really learn to live without them? Without the life I had built for so many years? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay here forever. I couldn't let them push me out of my own life. I had to find a way to fight back. And I would. I didn't know how yet, but I would. I stood up, wiped away the tears that had been silently streaming down my face, and walked towards the door. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I was going to do something. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. It had been a few days since I had that conversation with Tara, and things had only gotten worse. Every time I passed through the house, I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me. The air felt different, as though the walls were closing in on me, and I could no longer recognize the place I had spent most of my life. The smell of Noel's cologne still lingered in the air, but it was no longer comforting. It was a reminder of everything I had lost. My mind kept going back to what Tara had said, the way she had so casually dismissed me. Pack your bags and learn to live on your own, she had told me, as if it was nothing more than a simple request. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something darker lurking beneath the surface. I had always been a mother who gave everything for her family. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own desires, for the sake of my children. But now, it seemed as if that had all been in vain. I had spent years taking care of them, making sure they had everything they needed, and yet here I was, being pushed out of my own home. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the plan all along. Had Tara always been plotting to get me out of the picture? I had seen the way she looked at me, the way she spoke to me. There was no warmth in her voice, no love in her eyes. She had always been cold, but now, it was like she was actively trying to remove me from the equation. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. Every time I tried to focus on something else, I was reminded of how alone I was. Warren hadn't said a word to me since that night. He hadn't even called to check on me. It was as if I didn't exist to him anymore. I had always been there for him, through every heartbreak, every victory, every moment of his life. But now, he couldn't even be bothered to speak to me. I thought about calling him, asking him to come over, to talk to me, to explain why everything had changed. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't make a difference. He had already made his choice. Tara had won. And I had lost. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had been taken for granted. How many times had I put my needs aside to take care of them? How many times had I sacrificed my own happiness for their sake? And now, it seemed like all of that meant nothing. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. I passed by the living room, where Noel and I had spent countless evenings, laughing, talking, sharing our lives. The room felt cold now, the furniture almost foreign to me. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to live in a house that had become a reminder of everything I had lost. I thought about leaving, about finding a new place to live, but the thought scared me. I had no idea where I would go. I had no family left, no one to turn to. It was just me, alone, trying to figure out how to survive in a world that had suddenly become so cold. I walked into the kitchen, where I used to cook dinner for the family, where I used to make their favorite meals. But the kitchen didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a place I had been kicked out of, a place where I no longer had a place. The refrigerator was full of food, but it felt pointless. I didn't feel like cooking. I didn't feel like eating. The thought of preparing another meal for people who didn't even care enough to show up made my stomach turn. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands resting on the worn surface. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the chair where Noel used to sit. The chair that was now empty, just like my heart. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had cried enough. It didn't change anything. I had given everything I had to this family, and now I was being thrown away like I didn't matter. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. But what could I do? How could I fight back against the people I had spent my whole life loving? I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't stay here anymore. I couldn't keep living in a place where I wasn't wanted. I had to find a way to take control of my life again, to find some semblance of peace. But it felt impossible. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to begin again. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let them push me out of my own life without a fight. I had lived through the worst of it. And now, I would fight for my right to exist in this world, to have a place in the family that I had helped build. I stood up from the table, wiping away the few tears that had escaped. It was time to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed to reclaim my life. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going down without a fight. The days passed, each one dragging on like a slow, painful reminder of my new reality. I had tried to ignore the feeling of being a stranger in my own home, but it was impossible. The silence was oppressive, and every corner of the house seemed to echo with memories of a life I no longer recognized. I spent most of my time sitting in the living room, looking at the photos on the walls, trying to remember a time when things were simple, when I was a part of something. But now, it was as though I had been erased from the picture. Every time I looked at my phone, there were no calls, no messages from Warren. Not even a simple check-in. Tara was the same, cold, distant, as if I had never been a part of their lives. It hurt more than I cared to admit, but I knew better than to let them see the extent of my pain. They had already made their decision, and I was no longer a part of their world. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to do something, anything, to regain control. I wasn't going to let them dictate my life. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they weren't going to get away with it so easily. One evening, as I sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street, a thought crossed my mind. I had spent so much of my life looking after everyone else, putting their needs before my own. But what about me? What about my needs, my desires? For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to think about what I wanted. I had always dreamed of traveling, of seeing the world beyond the confines of this small town, beyond the walls of this house. But I had always put those dreams aside for the sake of my family. Now, I was wondering if it was time to finally live for myself. I didn't know how to start, but I knew it was a step in the right direction. The thought of leaving, of starting over somewhere else, filled me with a mix of fear and excitement. But it was also liberating. I didn't have to be tied to the past anymore. I didn't have to be a part of a family that had made it clear they didn't want me. I had the power to change my own life. The next morning, I woke up early, the light streaming through the blinds casting a warm glow over the room. I knew what I had to do. I packed a bag, just a small one, for now. I didn't need much. A few clothes, some personal items, and the determination to finally take control of my life. I had no idea where I would go, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was taking the first step. I walked through the house one last time, each step heavy with the weight of everything I was leaving behind. The memories of Noel, of Warren, of a life I had once known, all felt like they were slipping away. But this was my choice. I didn't have to stay here and suffer in silence. I had the right to live my own life. I stood in front of the door, my hand on the knob. For a moment, I hesitated. But then I took a deep breath and stepped outside. The air was crisp, fresh, and filled with possibilities. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was no longer going to let fear control me. I was ready to live again. I walked down the street, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet morning. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of hope. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Maybe it was the beginning of my own story. And I was ready to write it. It had been a few days since I walked out of that house, and though the world around me seemed the same, everything had changed. I was no longer the woman who lived under the shadow of family expectations. I was no longer the mother, the grandmother, the woman who had given up her dreams to raise her son, to be there for him when he needed me. No, now I was someone else, someone who had been thrown aside, but who wasn't going to be silenced. I had no idea where I was headed, only that it had to be away from them, away from the house that had once been my home but was now a prison. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. The bed was small, the room plain, but it didn't matter. It was mine. The first night, I didn't sleep much. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about everything that had happened, about the things I had lost. My home, my family, my sense of belonging. But there was something else in my heart now, something that was slowly growing, anger. Anger at the way they had treated me, at the way they had tossed me aside as if I was nothing. But with that anger came something else. Strength. A strength I hadn't known I had. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I wasn't going to be the woman who let everyone walk all over her. I was going to take control of my life again. The next day, I found a small job at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. It wasn't long before I made a few friends there. Most of the people I met were younger than me, but they didn't treat me like I was invisible. They didn't look at me with pity or disgust, like my family had. They saw me for who I was, a woman who had lived a full life, and who was still standing, still fighting. I was beginning to feel something I hadn't felt in years: independence. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in charge of my own life. I had made the decision to leave everything behind, and though it was hard, it was the best decision I had ever made. I wasn't sure how long I could stay in this small town, or if I would eventually go somewhere else, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped. I was free. And that was enough. A few weeks later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Patricia. She had been a close friend of Noel's before he passed away, and I hadn't heard from her in a while. We caught up over coffee, and as we spoke, I could see the concern in her eyes. She knew what had happened with Warren and Tara. I hadn't told her the full details, but she knew enough. "You deserve better than this, Eleanor," Patricia said softly, her voice full of compassion. "You've given so much of yourself to them. It's time you gave something to yourself." I didn't know how to respond. For so long, I had been giving everything to everyone else, never thinking about what I wanted. But hearing her say that, hearing someone acknowledge my pain, made me realize how much I had been holding in. I had spent so many years trying to keep my family together, trying to make everyone happy, that I had forgotten about myself. But I wasn't going to forget anymore. As the days passed, I started to feel stronger. I found myself smiling more, talking more, enjoying the simple things in life again. I still thought about my old life, the house, my family, the life I had worked so hard to build, but I no longer let those thoughts consume me. I had found my own strength, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. One evening, after work, I sat in my small room at the motel, looking out the window at the street below. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the town. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I wasn't where I had planned to be at this point in my life, but I was exactly where I needed to be. I was starting over, and that felt good. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be days when I would miss my old life, when I would long for the days when my family was whole. But I also knew that I had the power to create a new life for myself. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't powerless. I was Eleanor Thompson, and I was going to make the rest of my life count. It had been weeks since I left everything behind, and yet, the feeling of freedom still hadn't fully sunk in. The pain of what happened with Tara and Warren was still there, lingering in the back of my mind, but each day, it became a little easier to breathe, to let go. I had learned to live on my own terms again. It was a quiet life, nothing grand, but it was mine. I worked at the diner every day, meeting new people, and even though I was still getting used to this new version of my life, there was a strange sense of comfort in the routine. Every shift brought something new, a different face, a different story, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions. I felt connected to something again, something beyond the walls of my former life. I spent the nights in my little motel room, thinking about how far I had come. But I still couldn't completely shake the feeling that something was missing. I still wanted to hear from Warren. I still wanted him to care. I didn't know why I kept holding on to that hope, that desire to have things go back to how they used to be. But no matter how much time passed, the longing didn't fade. One day, as I was walking back from work, I ran into someone unexpected, Warren. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him standing on the sidewalk, his face tired, his posture slightly slumped. He looked different. Not in a bad way, but there was something in his eyes, a weariness, a sadness that I hadn't seen before. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, two strangers trying to find a connection in a world that had pulled us apart. Finally, he broke the silence. "Mom, I've been trying to find you," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I didn't know what to say. I had been preparing myself for this moment for weeks, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure I was ready. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Why now?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been an idiot, Mom. I've been so caught up in everything, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I didn't know what to feel." Part of me wanted to reach out and hold him, to tell him everything was going to be okay, that I understood. But another part of me was still so angry, so hurt by everything that had happened. "You have no idea how much you hurt me, Warren," I said, my voice more firm than I expected. "You and Tara both. You abandoned me." He looked down, his face filled with guilt. "I know, Mom. I know. I wasn't thinking. I was trying to make her happy, trying to keep the peace, and I didn't even realize what I was doing to you." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, a glimmer of the son I had known and loved. But the hurt was still there. "You can't just undo what you did, Warren. You can't just come back and expect everything to be fine." He nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I don't expect that. I know I can't fix it. I just want a chance to make things right, to start over." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him not as my son, but as a man who was trying to find his way, just like I was. I took a deep breath, my mind swirling with conflicting emotions. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Warren. I'm not even sure what forgiveness would look like." He took a step closer, his voice low but earnest. "I don't need you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm here. And I'm sorry for everything." We stood there for a while, in silence, neither of us sure of what to say next. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was a start. Maybe we couldn't go back to what we had, but maybe, just maybe, we could start building something new, something better. "I need time, Warren," I said finally, my voice softer now. "I need time to heal, to figure out who I am without all of this." He nodded, his face somber but understanding. "Take all the time you need, Mom. I'm not going anywhere." I wasn't sure where things would go from here. I wasn't sure if we could repair the broken pieces of our relationship. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice in the matter. I wasn't just waiting for things to happen to me anymore. I could decide how to move forward, what path to take. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I was in control. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid of it. I had learned to stand up for myself, to put my needs first. And whatever happened, I would face it with strength. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger, braver, more determined than I had ever been. And that was something no one could take away from me. It had been several weeks since I last saw Warren, and though things had been quiet, there was still this gnawing feeling in my chest. I kept telling myself that I was moving on, that I had left everything behind, but I couldn't shake the memories of the way things used to be. The house, the family, the life I had once known, it was all a distant echo now. I tried to focus on my new routine. I worked, I met new people, and I even found myself laughing again. It felt like I was starting to come back to life, piece by piece. But there were still moments when the weight of everything would hit me, moments when I would feel completely alone, like I was drifting in a sea of unfamiliar faces. I tried not to think about Warren and Tara. They were no longer my concern. But despite my best efforts, the silence between us lingered. I hadn't heard from Warren since our last conversation, and part of me wondered if I ever would. Maybe he had meant what he said when he told me he was sorry. Maybe he was just giving me the space I needed. Or maybe he had just moved on, leaving me behind like everyone else. I didn't know what the right answer was, but I knew that I couldn't wait forever for things to get better. I had to take control of my own life. It was one of those quiet afternoons when I was sitting in my little apartment, reading a book, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was surprised when I opened the door to find Patricia standing there, a warm smile on her face. "Eleanor," she said, her voice full of kindness. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside to let her in, my heart skipping a beat. It had been a while since we last talked, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Of course, Patricia," I said, my voice soft. "What's going on?" She walked into the small living room, looking around at the space I had made for myself. "I know this might sound a little strange, but I've been thinking about you a lot," she began, sitting down across from me. "I know you're still processing everything that's happened, but I just wanted to tell you that you're not alone." I felt a lump form in my throat at her words. I hadn't realized just how much I had needed to hear that until she said it. "Thank you, Patricia," I said, my voice a little shaky. "It's just. Sometimes it feels like everything I've ever known has disappeared, you know? Like I don't belong anywhere anymore." Patricia nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "I get it," she said gently. "But you do belong. You belong here, in this world, in this life. And no matter what they've done, you haven't lost your place. You just need to remember that." I sat back in my chair, taking a deep breath. Patricia's words resonated with me in a way I wasn't expecting. For so long, I had allowed myself to be defined by the roles I played in my family, mother, wife, grandmother. But I wasn't just those things. I was Eleanor, a woman who had lived a full life, who had loved and been loved, who still had so much to give. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't defined by the past. I was free to be whoever I wanted to be. I didn't have to hold on to the past, to the people who had hurt me. I didn't have to let their actions dictate how I felt about myself. I had the power to choose who I was and what I wanted from life. Patricia was right. I wasn't alone. And I didn't have to settle for the life that had been handed to me. I could make my own path. As Patricia and I talked, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I realized that it was time to take another step forward. I had been so focused on what I had lost that I had forgotten about what I could still gain. I had spent so many years sacrificing for others, putting their needs before my own, that I had neglected myself. But now, it was time to put myself first. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I was going to live it for me. I wasn't going to let anyone control my life anymore. I was going to take the reins and make something new, something better. The next day, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I got dressed, put on my favorite lipstick, and walked out the door with my head held high. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I was headed towards something good. I was no longer the woman who had been left behind. I was the woman who was taking her life back. And no matter how hard it was, I was going to fight for it. It had been a few months since I started my new life, and though I was still adjusting to the changes, I had learned to find peace in the small victories. I had my own apartment now, not much but enough for me to feel independent again. The walls were bare, the furniture simple, but it was mine. The days weren't always easy, and sometimes I would still find myself lost in the memories of the past, of the life I had left behind. But I had learned to push those moments aside, to focus on what was ahead. I had a routine now. I woke up early every morning, went to work at the diner, and spent my evenings reading, taking walks, or simply enjoying the quiet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself. One evening, after a long shift, I was walking back to my apartment when I saw a familiar face across the street. It was Warren. I stopped in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat. I hadn't expected to see him, not after everything that had happened. He was standing on the corner, looking a little lost, his hands shoved in his pockets. It was a moment of hesitation, but I found myself walking toward him. When he saw me, his face softened, and for a brief moment, I saw the son I had raised, the one I had loved. "Mom," he said, his voice tentative. "Can we talk?" I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to turn around and walk away, to keep my distance, but another part of me wanted to hear what he had to say. "Sure," I said, my voice calm but guarded. "Let's talk." We walked to a nearby bench, and he sat down beside me, keeping a little distance between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, full of so many unspoken words. Finally, Warren broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened." "About what?" "I did," he began, his eyes focused on the ground. "And I need to tell you that I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go the way it did. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know how to respond. There was so much I wanted to say, so much anger and hurt I still carried. But I kept my thoughts to myself, letting him speak. I got caught up in everything," he continued, his voice thick with regret. "Tara and we were both so focused on what we wanted that I didn't even stop to think about what you needed. I should have been there for you. I should have stood up for you." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but the pain was still there. "It's not just about what you did, Warren," I said quietly, my voice tinged with sadness. "It's about how I was made to feel. Like I didn't matter. Like everything I did for this family didn't count." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with regret. "I know. And I wish I could take it all back. I should have been there for you, Mom. I should have protected you. I've been a coward." I could see the shame in his eyes, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of compassion. "You weren't the only one at fault, Warren," I said softly. "I should have stood up for myself too. I should have said something sooner, instead of just accepting the way things were." He nodded, his face reflecting the weight of the conversation. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I want you to know that I'm trying to do better. I want to be a better son. And I want to make things right, if you'll let me." I didn't know if I could forgive him, or if I even wanted to, but in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't have to carry the weight of the past on my shoulders anymore. I didn't have to keep holding on to the hurt, to the anger. I could let go. Not for him, but for me. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, or if things would ever go back to the way they were. But I knew that I had the power to choose my own path, to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with him, and with the rest of my family. "I don't know what's going to happen next, Warren," I said slowly. "But I think we can start over. I think we can figure this out, one step at a time." He looked at me, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'd like that, Mom. I really would." And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the resolution I had been hoping for, but it was a start. A step toward healing. A step toward rebuilding what had been broken. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But I had learned that sometimes, the smallest steps forward were the most important. And I was ready to take them. It had been a few more weeks since that moment with Warren, and life felt like it was starting to settle into a new rhythm. I had kept my promise to myself, to not rush the process, to not expect everything to heal overnight. There were still days when the weight of everything would hit me, when I would wake up with the emptiness of the past hanging over me. But there were more days when I woke up and felt like I was finally breathing again. Slowly, I had built my own little world. I had my small apartment, my job at the diner, my quiet evenings. And while it wasn't the life I had imagined when I was younger, it was my life, and that was enough. One afternoon, as I was finishing up my shift at the diner, I saw a familiar face walk through the door. It was Patricia. She smiled warmly at me, and I immediately felt a sense of comfort. Patricia had always been there for me, ever since Noel passed. She had become one of the few people I felt I could rely on, and I was grateful for her. She slid into the booth across from me, her eyes scanning the room before settling back on me. "How are you doing, Eleanor?" she asked softly, her voice kind. Better, I replied with a small smile. It's been a journey, but I'm getting there. She nodded, as if she understood. Patricia had always been someone who saw past the surface, who understood the weight people carried, even when they didn't speak it aloud. I've been thinking about you, she said. I know it's been hard, and I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You don't have to go through this alone, you know. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel a little bit of relief. I know, I said quietly. I'm still getting used to everything, still figuring things out. But I'm okay, Patricia. I'm learning how to live for myself again. She smiled, and there was a warmth in her eyes that made me feel like maybe I was on the right path. That's good to hear, Eleanor. You deserve happiness, and I hope you find it, whatever that looks like for you. Her words stayed with me long after she left. It was a reminder that there was still good in the world, still people who cared. It was easy to forget that, especially when the world felt so heavy. But Patricia's kindness had a way of breaking through that heaviness, reminding me that I wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, I spent more time focusing on myself. I started taking longer walks in the evenings, exploring the parts of the town I had never noticed before. I visited the library, read books that had nothing to do with family or loss, and slowly began to reclaim parts of me that had been lost for so long. I even took up painting again, something I hadn't done since I was young. It was small, simple things, but they made a big difference. One day, while I was walking home from the diner, I passed by a park I used to visit with Noelle. We had spent so many afternoons there, watching the children play, talking about our dreams, our plans for the future. I hadn't been back there since he passed, and as I stood there at the entrance, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. But this time, it wasn't just sadness. It was a mixture of grief and gratitude. Grief for what I had lost, and gratitude for the life I had lived. I stood there for a long time, just watching the people walk by, the children laughing as they ran through the grass. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I felt like I had come to terms with my past, with everything that had happened. And I was finally ready to move forward. I wasn't sure where this journey would take me, but I knew it was my own to take. I had already walked away from the life I had known, from the people who had abandoned me, and I had survived. That in itself was a victory. The next day, I got a call from Warren. It had been weeks since we last spoke, and I didn't know what to expect. But when I answered the phone, his voice was different. It was softer, more vulnerable. Mom, he said, his voice quiet, I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to try again. I know I've made mistakes, and I don't know if you can forgive me, but I want to be there for you. I want to make it right. I listened to him, the words hanging in the air between us. Part of me wanted to say yes, to forgive him and go back to the way things were. But I knew I couldn't. I had to do this for myself, not for him. Warren, I said gently, I don't know what's going to happen between us, but I'm not the same person I was before. I've learned that I have to put myself first. I can't go back to what we had. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand, Mom, he said finally. I just wanted you to know that I'm here. And I'm sorry for everything. I hope, one day, we can find a way to rebuild what we lost. I didn't know if we ever would, but in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need to go back to the past. I didn't need to hold on to something that had already been broken. I was strong enough to create something new, something that was mine. I wasn't defined by the mistakes of the past. I was Eleanor, and I was finally free to live for myself.